And it was just so great. Like one night I was sitting down and just started talking to some people and thought these are bright people. And it was fun. It was Paul and Ann Ehrlich.
Oh, yeah.
And then a week later, I started talking with another guy, and he was speaking kind of rough Spanish, and he was sitting down with the gardeners, and he'd obviously been out all day. He was dirty, and we started talking. I said, this guy's almost as bright as that other couple. And it was E.O. Wilson. And that experience of kind of meeting with those researchers and scientists and all the people really interested in how to kind of protect and develop the area had a lot to do with my wanting to do this. And it's the model. If you look at the dining area there and then look at the dining area at Las Cruces Field Station, it's pretty similar. So there is not one original idea in this place, really. But I don't think there's been an original idea in gardening for the last 1,000 years.
Right.
They're all just twists on things that have been done, and but always getting at the same thing. The house was built on the other side of the property, and I was over here and just walking around, and all of a sudden started noticing different places and thought, gee, this would be a nice place for a Japanese garden, and this would be a nice place for this, and this would be great for vegetables. And it was like doing. That night I started sketching out, a plan, and that plan from that first night is really what's developed here. Oh, yeah. We thought of lots of different things. We thought of just leaving it alone. Mm-hmm. But being a North American, I have a hard time doing that. It was like the largest button company in New York, and one of his uncles remembered Tagua. He said, oh yeah, we used to use that. And he had been a young kid as it was being phased out. So the whole project kind of developed like that, and you got a hold of Yvon Chouinard, and so we had Patagonia and a couple of other companies interested in using the buttons. And then I guess some of the buttons were made too thin and they were cracking. There's sort of a minimum thickness they had to be, and that was something the modern button people weren't aware of. It's a little memory loss. And so they're making them thin, and they started cracking in washing machines and dry cleaning. A shipment of Tagua got sent to a manufacturing plant in Asia. And they arrived, and the bag was filled with the buttons and fungus. There was like a fuzzy fungus over everything. And they called Karen, and they were worried about opening it. Was it a disease? And Karen was in a bit of a panic about what to say and how could they get them, because they needed them to finish the shirts. And so I said, well, just tell them that it's a special process, and we're not going to charge them extra, although normally it's an extra charge to have the patina. Yeah, and it's a little medicinal herb garden, and we have a local witch who plants this and takes care of it. She makes teas and tinctures and ointments from here. She's got some other areas too that she grows, but this is her main garden. The plan is to have a First Nations garden. 4 gardens that are about the people who've settled here. So First Nations, the European settlers, and Japanese fishing community, and hippies. Yeah, this is a local guy who made this. It's all made out of stuff that was here on site. And his name is Jan Jansen. He does just great structures, and he shows up with a truckload full of driftwood and miscellaneous pieces and lights up a big joint and goes to work. So on the botany side, as you know, the climate in Tofino is very similar to southern Chile. And so this little area in here I've planted up with a lot of Chilean forest plants. So we have an alerce tree.
Oh, really?
But
alerce tree. Alerce is so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, alerce is the second longest living tree in the world.
Yeah.
And the tree is really analogous in the forest to the western red cedar. These can grow for up to 4,000 years old. So it's the second longest living next to a bristlecone. 3,000 species of plants in the southern cone of South America. BC has about 3,000 species. 3 overlap. This plant is Gunnera. This is the dark side of creating these gardens.
Oh, yeah.
In the fall. And she's doing her PhD thesis on invasive plants in Western Ireland.
Oh, yeah.
The #1 problem. She sent me photographs of entire valleys covered with nothing but this. Nothing else lives
Is that right?
under it or near it.
Oh, yeah.
So,
So you're going to watch this one carefully, huh?
well, we've dug a bunch of them out
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
have, destroyed them in burn piles, I guess. Well, we were out here developing a little garden and came across this. And we think that there's a connection with all of the Sasquatch stories, both in First Nations and European culture.
This was a family.
We did this on April 1st, a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
and put an article in the Westerly about an amazing discovery. And I got a call from Bruce Frank, who's one of the elected chiefs from the Tloquet First Nations, and he said, "George, I have to tell you that some of us are really upset about your digging up our ancestors." So he didn't know that he'd been had until he came over. Yeah.
The piece of the garden that I'm sure for a lot of people is so significant is just the ability to see this.
Yeah.
Because getting through here and being able to walk through without A, half killing yourself, and B, coming out soaking wet and covered with dirt, being able to walk through a forest like this and just see that landscape is pretty phenomenal.
Laying out the paths. People say, "Boy, these paths are just really nicely done," and it seems perfect. It was kind of where we could go.
Yeah, like there's no choice here.
And coming through here at the beginning, it's like climbing up on these logs and falling over into the salal and trying to shimmy up trees to see what was around. It was a good time, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you get a real sense of how these forests work in here, like this cedar leaning over 80, 90 years ago, falling into that other tree. Yeah. It doesn't knock the other tree over, and then the branching has just gone up and makes a lot of noise in a strong wind, that tree. So it will go over.
Yeah.
Things are always toppling.
But the interesting thing in it is what are the characteristics of this place that allowed it to become what perhaps is the best example of the transition from an industrial to a conservation economy. What allowed that to happen?
I think size is one thing. It's a small enough place that the individual characters all could have some impact in a larger way. And then, the demographics of who lived here. Again, comparing it to Ucluelet, Tofino had a lot of hippies who had stayed. And so there's kind of some of that American energy that was willing to create blockades and get arrested and be impolite. Part of the catalyst were, people who were willing to protest. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
if they had not stood at that road ending and said, "You are not driving that bulldozer around this corner," it really did come to a moment when they had to stand on a road and said, "No, stop. This is where it stops right here. No more."
Right, and it was considered outrageous.
Yeah.
People were so pissed off about it.